to Pints Politics 2.0. I'm still your host, Dan Parsons. As our longtime listeners may know, Pints Politics is a podcast and event-driven project that brings together diverse thought leaders to discuss the most important issues of our day. And we do so while enjoying a craft beer. So settle in, grab yourselves a craft beer, and enjoy the next 45, 50 minutes of this podcast. So tonight's a very special podcast, episode number 23, and we're recording live at the intersection of 14th and O in beautiful downtown Lincoln. How about that? And we're honored to be part of the 16th annual Lincoln Calling, Lincoln, Nebraska's annual nonprofit festival featuring music, art, innovation, and more. They've got 80 bands, 8 venues, and 4 days of great stuff. And so we're proud to be a small portion of that to discuss some real important issues here tonight. But Lincoln Calling, we thought, was a good fit because it is Lincoln's most diverse, inclusive, sustainable cultural event of the year. So, well, let me introduce our guests. They're not sitting in any order, but I'll try to go through my notes.
By age.
By age. Oh, no, don't.
Anna's older than me.
Oh, wow.
Be a test.
Oh, I wouldn't have guessed that. Interesting. We're learning things already.
Well,
Whoa, shots fired. We'll talk about guns in a minute.
so let me see if I can keep this straight. So sitting next to me, your left, my right? No, your right, my left. I've only had a sip of beer. Please welcome State Senator Anna Wishart to the stage. So Anna is a native Nebraskan, and she graduated from Middlebury College in Vermont. I didn't know that, Anna, till just I looked this up, with a degree in film studies. So what a great fit for tonight.
Anna needs it.
Yeah, Anna needs it, and we'll pass it along. So Anna was elected to the Lincoln Airport Authority prior to her current gig, and she's serving her first 4-year term as state senator from beautiful District 27 here in Lincoln. And Anna's day job, in addition to being a state senator, works as a director of partnerships at Beyond School Bells. Did I get that right? A coalition with a mission to improve access to quality after-school and summer school programming for Nebraska's youth. Anna, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here. Are we supposed to talk a little about the beer?
We're gonna do that after we introduce the 4 dudes on the couch.
Okay, well, great to be
There's
here.
3.
Thanks for having me.
So there are, I said 4 dudes on the sofa. There's only 3 dudes on the sofa. I've really only had 1 sip.
Very confused. There's a lot to count here.
That's right. So please welcome to the stage State Senator Adam Morfeld. So Adam is in his second 4-year term as state senator from the Fightin' 46th district right here in Lincoln.
Right here, we're sitting in it.
We are, aren't we? This is
your
your district. Holy smokes. Okay. Adam is the founder and executive director of the nonprofit organization Civic Nebraska. And I love this, Adam. You were born into a Marine Corps family and a son of a single mother. I just think that's outstanding part of your bio. Adam has an undergraduate and law degree from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And so, Adam, thanks for agreeing to be on the show.
You bet.
You're supposed to say something long enough that I get a sip of beer.
It's Friday.
Close enough. All right. Sitting next to Adam on the dude sofa is a former guest of Pints Politics, Jack Mitchell. Please welcome Jack Mitchell, the host of L&K Today with Jack and Friends. So, yeah, Jack, you appeared on episode number 5 of Pints Politics.
That's
remember
right. I enjoyed that.
Do you remember who was your guest?
It was me and you and Trent Feller.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to bring the beer and I forgot.
That's right.
So I made a quick run to N Street Drive-In. This is not a sponsored comment, but yeah, I went there.
That's right. Former City Councilman Trent Fellers. We had a fun time. So if you're listening, you can go back in the archives and find Jack and Trent's episode number 5. But Jack's a native Lincolnite, graduated from Lincoln High, and then
Lincoln
went
East,
on.
hold on, Lincoln East.
Oh my goodness.
Hold on.
Oh my goodness.
Hold on.
Man, this could ruin the whole night.
Okay.
Man.
Sorry if there's
How
any
did I get
links
that
out there,
wrong?
but that's incorrect.
That is so
Get
wrong.
this guy another beer.
He graduated from Lincoln East. And then went on to learn a law degree from the University of Nebraska.
That's right.
Holy smokes.
A few years ahead of Adam.
We've got a couple attorneys.
Recovering
up here.
attorneys. That's great.
Yeah, holy smoke. So after spending several years in civil litigation at a local law firm, Jack decided, what the heck, to act on his longtime dream to be involved with talk radio. And so since 2006, he's been a morning talk show host on KLIN. Does it seem like that long, Jack?
Some days it does, but in general, no. I would say no, but appreciate you having me. It's nice not to be the host once and be the one asking the questions and be answering the questions. So thank you for having me.
It's really intimidating.
Yeah, how's Dan doing so far?
Great. No, 100%. Probably a candidate to replace me very soon. Yeah.
Well, one of my jobs is just to keep the conversation going. So our last, but certainly not least, please welcome to the stage and to our podcast, Lincoln City Councilman Richard Mcginnis. Richard, before being elected just this past May to the Lincoln City Council, District Number 2. So we're a little off from your district.
You bet.
Yeah.
I'm that East High district.
Yeah, there you go. This is actually Tammy Ward's district downtown. But Richard served for 8 years on the Lincoln Public School Board. And so thanks for your service, Richard. Richard's office is just around the corner. He's president of NAI FMA Realty, locally owned commercial real estate company. And Richard's college education took place at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, where, this won't surprise you, he majored in economics.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy being far left on this stage. So we'll
get
see if
used
it
to it.
works really well. Yeah.
Well, we really are going to do our best to have a conversation that's meaningful and well-balanced and also entertaining, which happens as the beer flows. So here's what we're going to do. So the tradition, as Jack knows, of Pints and Politics is we enjoy a good craft beer and we talk politics. So tonight's beer is really pretty cool. So Zipline Brewing, let's hear it for Zipline Brewing Company. That got more applause than the politicians all put together.
We're used to that.
So Zipline Brewing Company and Lincoln Calling teamed up for a very special beer just for this festival. It's called Stage Dive Session IPA. So they created it with the concert goers in mind. So it's yes, exactly. So those of you at home listening to this, can they get it? I don't know. There's nobody from Zipline. Okay, so somebody's yelling at me from the Zipline. Very good. So all of their vendors have this beer, and so you can run out and find it. So let's taste it and describe it. It's a light-bodied, easy-drinking ale that blends orange, pine, and citrus from Centennial hops into I shouldn't tell you what the strength is. It's light drinking, 5.4 ABV. So, okay, everybody take a sip and give me your first impression. Anna, what do you think?
Well, for somebody that typically doesn't tend to like beer, I actually really like this. So congratulations, Zipline, you won me over. Say it's, trying trying to think of a metaphor here. It's pretty crisp. It's like wearing white pants after Labor Day. Pretty risky.
All right. 3 dudes on a couch. That could be another podcast. 3 dudes on a couch. Anybody have a comment?
I could, real quick.
Richard?
Again, it's a very light and very drinkable. It's a sippable beer. Probably not one I would drink all night long because I tend to have more than one at a time. But sure beats my Falstaff.
Also a Nebraska beer, right? Uh-huh.
It's crisp, smooth, and it has just enough alcohol in it.
Yeah. Jack, what do you think?
You know, I've been doing the keto thing for like a month. So this is the first beer I've had in a month. So you could have put hams up here, and I would have been like, "Boy, this is delightful."
Are you lying? Is that
No, it's true.
your first beer in a month?
First beer in a month. I had some White Claws and stuff, because that's 0 carbs. But yeah, no, it's true. The first beer, last one off for a couple of months, so I'm savoring it. I saw it first. I thought they were giving us orange juice, and I was like, this is weird. But no, it's not. Like, I thought it was going to be one of those juicy IPAs that you kind of get. And I was talking to Kevin Shin about this out in the audience, and it's a little bit more like piney. I think you said there was pine.
Yeah.
Pine flavors.
Pine notes, yeah.
I sniffed it a little, and I noticed that. So, yeah. You just notice that, Adam? Sniff it.
No.
Okay.
So
It's good. I enjoy it. But again, not much coming from me because I would have liked anything.
very good. There's so many celebrities out here in the audience. For those of you listening at home, my goodness,
right.
we got
Tammy
another
Ward,
city
James
councilman.
Michael Bowers.
Yeah.
two more city
Shout
council
out Randy
people.
Hawthorne. Where did he go?
Yeah,
We're close to have a quorum here in the city council. Just one more? Is that? Yeah.
That's right.
there's a Catholic priest in the audience. There's a barber in the audience. Holy smokes!
Shout out Jason Christensen right there. All Politics is Local Facebook page.
There you go.
See? Look at all the celebs.
All potential
You
future
have to go
guests.
get autographs after this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's dive into. Thanks for reviewing the beer, because that's the fun stuff. Now we get into the serious stuff. But
I think the next topic's pretty fun.
well, and Anna and Adam, this is right up. This is what you do. So I feel sorry for our producer Steve that's going to have to edit this when we're all done. But anyway, so we're going to talk about a couple issues tonight, and one of the issues that has been on a lot of people's minds and a lot of information in the news, both nationally but certainly here in Lincoln, is the issue of medical marijuana. And so I want Anna, Senator Wishart, and Senator Morfeld to talk about this, but just to kind of set it up, you guys worked long and hard in your legislative session, both this past session and previous sessions, to convince your colleagues to pass a law that would allow medical marijuana in Nebraska. And as hard as you worked, and I know you worked hard because I watched a lot of those sessions, your colleagues didn't choose to vote this as a Nebraska law. So you're taking it to the people. So talk a little bit, Anna, if you wouldn't mind, Senator, talk about that process in the legislative process, and then the failure for your colleagues to go along, and now what you're doing and asking the people of the state of Nebraska to weigh in.
Well, so first of all, I'd encourage all of you there's plenty of history out there on the sort of political history of marijuana, and I'd encourage all of you to read about it and go way back. I mean, this is a 10,000 plus year old plant, and it's really incredible to follow its history and how we got to today. 5 years ago was when the first bill was introduced in Nebraska. It was introduced by Senator Tommy Garrett. I wasn't in the legislature at the time, but Adam was. He's a conservative senator from Sarpy County, but he has a group of families, many who have kids with epilepsy, who have been working on this issue far longer than any of the politicians in this state. And so he brought the bill. He came very close to passing it. He brought it 2 years in a row. And when I was going door knocking, I had followed this issue as a staff member. And when I was going door knocking, it was really surprising to me how much it came up. And it was one of those issues when it comes up, when people are talking about it, they're talking about a real life situation. I met a doctor in the district who has MS, and it's now evidence shows that it helps people with multiple sclerosis. Met families with kids with epilepsy. That's probably the most heart-wrenching. And then people struggling with chemotherapy, fighting cancer, and this is a way for them to keep an appetite. Everybody laughs about marijuana causing the munchies. Well, if you're battling HIV or if you're battling cancer, it's very helpful to be hungry when you otherwise wouldn't be. So I took a deep breath and I introduced the bill. Before I did, my husband was a police officer for 5 years, and I asked him, am I really off on this? I mean, is this terrible of a substance? And he said, no. I mean, they deal with alcohol, frankly, more than they ever deal with marijuana. So I introduced the bill, took a deep breath, thought it would be an avalanche of negativity around what I thought was a hot button issue, and I have been overwhelmed by how many people have supported this issue. Across Nebraska, this polls over 70%, even with some of the most conservative groups, because you'd be hard-pressed at this point with 32 states having legalized medical marijuana for someone not to know someone who's benefited in a state where it's legal. Yet here we treat them like criminals. We tried 3 years in a row to get it passed. I have to say, as much as I get frustrated with my colleagues, we're not alone in this. There is no state that has legislatively passed an initiative. Well, actually, I wouldn't say no, but I don't know. I can't recall any state that's passed it legislatively. It happens from the ballot. It's one of those issues where the politicians are behind what the people want.
Well, and thank you, Senator. So, Senator Morfeld, talk a little bit about that next step that you took to now bring this to the people.
Well, yeah, and Senator Wishart is definitely the policy expert on medical marijuana, without a doubt. And the area that wasn't a joke.
It was a shout out. Yeah.
Not the. Oh, okay. No, I mean subject matter expert. No, but I mean Anna definitely has been working really hard to get it passed in the legislature. I think that what the bill that you saw was probably the tightest, most controlled piece of medical marijuana policy that's probably been introduced in any legislature, and still the Nebraska legislature declined. Declined to pass that legislation. So that was I think a clear sign to Senator Wishart, to myself, and many of the people that are proponents of medical marijuana, that the only resort was to go to the ballot and go to the people. Because if we weren't going to pass the most restrictive and the most narrow medical marijuana policy, then we weren't going to be able to pass anything in the legislature. And on this issue, I worked very hard on Medicaid expansion, as many people know, and we would have died for the polling that we have on the medical marijuana issue. I think on the best day, we polled at about 59%, and we did several polls throughout the campaign on Medicaid expansion. And with medical marijuana, it's been in the newspaper. I mean, we polled well above 70% on that issue. 55% of Republicans, about 70 to 80% of Democrats. Independents are right up there as well. This is an issue that is a no-brainer for Nebraskans, and so that's why we're going to the ballot. We're collecting signatures on a volunteer basis. We have a volunteer coordinator, but we're hoping to do paid collection here soon, and once it gets on the ballot, pass it into the Constitution.
And that is important. Thank you for that summary. And that is important to think about. As someone that deals with the news media and someone that deals with public opinion, I know for a fact that you're right. Any issue, any politician would love to have those kind of numbers. From Jack, I'm interested from a media standpoint. What would that be compared to in Nebraska as far as an overwhelming support for an issue that maybe you've seen in the past? Put you on the spot.
What'd you say, 70 something percent?
Usually about 7.
Yeah, 70. Whether or not Nebraska's going to beat Illinois by double digits, that would probably be right around there. No, I don't know. I'm not sure what the equivalent issue is, Dan. It's
but
hard
you
to tell,
agree,
but
it's
interesting to hear Adam say that because I've heard the rumors about that polling. I've heard the numbers, and it's just so fascinating to me that here we have another issue, and there's a long list of them, where ballot initiative process has become more and more of a tool when the legislature doesn't act or it acts in a way that people don't like. And it's ended up happening on both sides. You guys know, from the death penalty, from Medicaid expansion, as you know, Adam, and all of you know, and now potentially here. And here you've got, if your numbers are right, 70% of the state who are supporting this thing, and a legislature that can't get it through. To me, that's the fascinating story about all of these ballot initiatives over and over, and property taxes as well. I mean, we're going to get to the point where that might end up being on the ballot as well, where you've got a constitutional amendment, property taxes, and people are going to get a flat income tax exemption, basically, or income tax. They're going to get money on their income taxes for that because the legislature over and over hasn't been able to get anything done. And I don't say that to rip you guys, but man, this has become the second branch of the Nebraska legislature more than it's ever been, and so many times the numbers that you see, the polling and the final results on these initiatives is so out of step with the legislature. It's fascinating that these people all got elected, to tell you the truth.
Well, there has been a long history. Nebraska has a long history of just what you said, Jack. The petition process is the second house. Because of our unique legislative session of just one house legislature, nonpartisan, we've got a long history of Nebraska voters taking matters into their own hands and becoming that check to the balance of the one house legislature. Richard, jump in there.
Well, I'm so happy the state has to take this up instead of the city. I'm not one for long meetings, and I have a feeling that would be a long meeting, but you're talking a 70% approval possibly for the marijuana. The only one I know who got more than 70% was Adam when he ran. Got reelected by more than 70. But again, you're right about the second house. It's too bad that it has to get there and that it has to go that far with it. And for me, it would have been a no-brainer that we could have gotten this passed legislatively. And it's too bad. And there's some other things to legislate that is having some problems with that we'll keep an eye on as a state. A lot of it is the gun laws, and we'll talk about those later. But overall, I think this is something that will pass, and I hope it does.
Dan, do you mind if I ask these guys a question? Here I am trying to revert into my old role. But what was the most defeating argument to the two of you? I know you don't buy into it, but what was the argument that killed you in this thing?
I think when you're talking medical specifically, the argument that a lot of people use is that we need to go through an FDA process, that because we consider this a medicine, we'd have to go through an FDA process. But the problem is that's never going to happen, because the way that the FDA works is you have to apply with research for the FDA to approve you as a medicine. And every time an organization, there was a group of scientists in Amherst that tried to sort of check all the boxes to come before the FDA, and the DEA immediately stops it from happening. So it's so broken up on the federal level, which is why states have just exercised our 10th Amendment, flexed our muscles, and said we're going to move forward.
I mean, it's so interesting because people are like, well, we wouldn't mind. I mean, our opponents say, well, we wouldn't mind having medical marijuana, but it needs to go through an FDA process. Meanwhile, a week before, the groups that are supporting them are down at the FDA making sure that there isn't an FDA process that can actually approve medical marijuana and actually go through the process. So it's one of those things. It's a circular argument And, it's a really disingenuous one at best. When we know that doctors that work with people with epilepsy, cancer patients, AIDS patients know that there are real impact and real benefits to medical marijuana in the medicinal use.
Well, and it's pretty ridiculous too, because anybody that says it can't be done, 32 states have done it. It's not like they did it yesterday. They've had it on the books for years. Not one state that's passed any form of legalization has gone back. Not one has gone back on that. In fact, most of them expand because they recognize that a regulated system is better than people in the dark being treated like criminals for their illnesses.
So, just to be totally transparent, I did invite onto the panel tonight a representative from Sam, Nebraska, one of the opponents to seeing this to be successful on the ballot. Sam, Nebraska's Smart Approaches to Marijuana, Nebraska. And they, as some of you in the audience may know, they aired actually radio ads statewide earlier this summer. And one of their taglines was, "Preventing another big tobacco," which I don't really understand. But anyway, I invited several representatives from Sam, Nebraska to appear on the panel tonight, and it didn't work out for them. So trying to be that other voice.
They're scared of Anna.
To be that other voice, here's a couple of the arguments that I know you guys have heard that they say is why Nebraskans should not approve. And you've touched on a couple of them, but one of them, again, I just got this off their website. They noted that the superintendent of the Nebraska State Patrol, whose boss is, of course, the governor, testified before the legislature that marijuana legalization, and again, I'm just reading this verbatim off from their website, they did not say medical marijuana, but they noted that marijuana legalization would make narcotics enforcement more difficult. And they cite that many or all of Nebraska's drug canine units would have to be replaced at significant cost to law enforcement agencies. So, Anna?
They know where my weak spot is. It's dogs.
The kryptonite.
No, the reason that law enforcement in the past, and actually we were really lucky. Most of the organizations were completely neutral on this, and they've been great to work with. Marijuana is used as a tool for finding other drugs because you can smell it. And so it allows you then to pull over somebody, you can smell it, you have reason to search their car, you find something else. So that's one of the concerns they have. In terms of the dogs, we debunked that pretty quickly. You can retrain dogs. That's a wonderful thing about dogs. But it's interesting, if you look at other states that have legalized medical marijuana, and you look at law enforcement, and you take their quotes before it was legalized, where the sky would fall, and then a year later, the same law enforcement officers, 2 years later, 3 years later, being quoted saying, this has not been a problem. So I would anticipate that those that in our state who are concerned about it, we would legalize it and they'd find in the long run the sky does not fall.
Here's one more issue that Sam, Nebraska, and again, I'm just reading this verbatim since they weren't able to provide us with a guest tonight, but they said impairment due to marijuana use is a major safety hazard, both for the user and other drivers. They cited a 2012 analysis determining that acute marijuana consumption nearly doubles a driver's risk of being involved in a car accident resulting in serious injury or death. I'll just tell you that what occurred to me when I started hearing these radio ads this summer is, as a somewhat informed audience member of these radio ads, I was confused. I thought they were talking about actual recreational marijuana instead of what you are asking Nebraskans to weigh in on is medical marijuana. And so it seemed a little confusing to me. So.
In terms of the intoxication while driving, clearly in my legislation and also in the constitutional amendment at the ballot that we're looking to pass, it clearly states that you cannot drive impaired. But I mean, there are many drugs that people take that are legal that make you impaired to drive, and we don't then say that's the drug's fault. We say that's the person who chooses to drive while they're intoxicated. That's their responsibility for not doing that. So again, if you look at any other drug that's legal that causes intoxication, we don't think immediately we're going to make that illegal. We just are very clear that you cannot drive while intoxicated.
Here's the reason there's 70% on this. There are stories out there of people who have had success or could have success in treating something with this. Yeah, every policy, you guys know this, every policy has unintended consequences. There are issues with them. But I think by and large, the people who have looked at this and heard those stories of where it could be a real benefit don't see a corresponding unintended consequence that's overtly negative. Anna's exactly, criminy, sorry about my language, but how many things in your medicine cabinet that you take shouldn't you drive after already? That's not an argument. There's all kind, Advil PM probably, right? Certainly there are things you shouldn't drive. So I don't know, that's not a dispositive argument at all to me when it comes to recreational marijuana, and that's where so many of these arguments are. They're based on this fear of reefer madness, and I think it's a kind of a failure of the opposition against it, and the poll numbers that you've talked about have shown that a little bit. I haven't seen strong enough arguments against it. I don't get on the air and I don't rail for it or against it for the most part, but if I'm being an objective arbiter of the arguments that I've seen, the arguments against it haven't been solid. And I think that's what the poll numbers are where they are.
If I may, just Richard, weigh in anytime you want, sir.
These guys are good.
They are good, aren't they? Well, we'll get to some local issues here in a minute.
They're a little more professional than I am.
Just one more, again, just trying to provide some balance, because that's what Pints Politics is, discussion of these tough issues while we're enjoying. By the way, does anybody need a refill? We're okay?
I'm on my second. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks to Kim, we're all well supplied. That's a great beer. It's an easy drinking beer. Thank you, Zipline. So one last thought, and then we're going to turn to another issue. But the other issue that the opposition talks about is marijuana is big business. This is just, that's why the tobacco and pharmaceutical industries are investing so heavily in the cultivation and sale of marijuana products. Again, I don't understand it, and so maybe one of you can help me understand. Richard.
Yeah, it is big business when it goes full blown. The people in Denver have made, in commercial real estate, that there's been a lot of money made in doing it right and doing it under the laws and having it as a product that's available to the public. And so, yeah, in a way, it is big business, and there's a lot of money being made and a lot of taxes being paid on it.
Yeah, it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. More and more countries are starting to legalize it, and you're starting to now see importing. And I do think it's an interesting argument for people to say, no, we don't want economic growth out of this. The other thing I'd say, too, is to those who, the same group, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, the same group that argues that this is all big business, the first thing that they went after in the first draft of my bill was the ability of somebody, just for the price of seeds, to grow up to 6 plants on their own. That was the first thing they went after. So if you're that concerned about big business, then why would you be going after somebody being able to grow a plant in their house completely separate from any kind of industry and be able to treat their ailment? So it's a little hypocritical.
Well, that's a really good discussion. And boy, the the crowd keeps moving in. We're continuing to, and don't forget, after we're done, then the real fun starts, the music starts. So.
But real quick, Dan, it's just bizarre to me that we're having this debate in the midst of the opioid crisis, frankly, as well.
That's exactly right, Jack. Talk about that.
I don't know that. Do you see you see these settlements right now that these opioid companies, which are, the FDA is approved, right? These are things that are legal, unlike medical marijuana in the state of Nebraska. But I mean, man, if you take a look at the damage that is being done, it just requires some real, and maybe you're going to bite the bullet and you say, hey, man, we need to clear out all of these pharmaceuticals. We need to get rid of opioids. But it requires some real bending over backwards inconsistency sometimes to say, hey, well, look, those things are okay, those things are permissible, those things are legal, but medical marijuana, that crosses the line. I mean, that's here. The opioid problem's over here, to be honest. And to me, it's just a bizarre thing to watch this entire argument.
I asked our county sheriff in the Judiciary Committee hearing, in his 20 years, I think it was even more, of him being county sheriff, how many people did he see die directly because of a marijuana overdose? He said 0. He said 0. How many people have you seen die directly because of an opiate overdose? He said countless. I can't even count how many. And he was testifying in opposition to Senator Wishart's bill. I mean, I just think that the facts and the data and the results in terms of the actual medicinal qualities of this type of drug.
Like, it's just bizarre that this resistance would come up in the midst of the opioid crisis.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
It's
especially since states, and we're starting to learn this more and more as more states legalize, but states who have legal medical marijuana systems offer a doctor a tool to treat pain in a way that's far less toxic, because you can't fatally overdose from marijuana. I mean, think about that. You can fatally overdose from water, salt, a lot of things. You cannot fatally overdose from marijuana. Not one case in the 10,000 years this has been on this earth of doing that. So doctors have this tool where they can treat somebody's pain. It's less addictive. You can't overdose from it in terms of the result being death, like opioids. So what we're starting to see is research showing that in states where it's legal, you're having fewer deaths from opioid overdoses.
How many states, Senator, did you say have already done something like what this would be?
32.
So this is what drives me crazy. And Nebraska is never the first to do anything. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, to be honest. But man, there are examples out there, right? There are places we can look and try and find out what the implications are. Yet somehow we can never agree on what the implications are. But it's not a mystery at this point what the implications are going to be. Over half the country has it, right?
The sky has not fallen.
Do we like that or not? Look at all these states. Is it working or is it not? I mean, it's not rocket science, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, Nebraska, we don't do a lot of things first. But in the case of medical marijuana, we're like dead last. We are
but
literally
the good
one
part
of
is
three.
We can evaluate all of these arguments with data. Like, we can do that. And it's great. We don't have to speculate. And that's one of the things. And maybe you'll come out for it, and maybe you come out against it. But we don't have to sit here and guess and bagash about everything.
Okay, just real quick. So if people in our audience tonight, people that are listening on the podcast, want to learn more and want to know how they can support, if they can sign the petition, where should they go?
Go to nebraskamarijuana.org. You can find us on Facebook as well. But that's our website. You can sign up. Please volunteer. We need all of your help to collect signatures. And everybody loves this issue, so it's a really fun time.
Or go to any farmer's market. You'll get hit up there.
I assume somebody's here tonight, maybe. Okay, listen, we've got about 15 minutes left in our segment, believe it or not. And so I wanted to talk about another controversial issue. But before I do that, raise your hand if you need another beer. and somebody will bring you one. Not the audience, just the panelists. Sorry, my pockets aren't that deep. Anyway, thanks again to Zipline Brewing for brewing this wonderful stage dive session IPA that we're enjoying up here. But so I wanted to turn the corner a little bit and talk about another controversial issue that's talked about not only nationally, but also here in the state and also locally, and that is looking at our gun laws and the continued horrific incidents that are going on across the country with deaths due to guns. And so, again, I reached out to a few people to talk about this issue, but I think we got the firepower to talk about guns here on the dais tonight. So, and I know that the city of Lincoln is considering. And again, keep in mind, I want to talk broadly. I don't necessarily want to talk about specifics, but I want to just talk about broadly the idea of what can we do about this epidemic of gun violence in America today, and with keeping in mind balancing that with our Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. So I don't know who wants to start, but Richard is handing a beer. Thank you, Richard. So I'll just start with, I looked up on the NRA website, and there was a guest editorial in our local Lincoln Journal-Star by the state director of the NRA. And in this, Chris Kopacik, say it again? Kopacki is the state director of the NRA. I assume you guys all have talked to him. But anyway, he wrote just recently in the Lincoln Journal-Star, he said, I quote, "A radical gun control group, Lincoln-based Nebraskans Against Gun Violence, is seeking to punish," he used the word punish, "Lincoln's honest, hardworking gun owners for the acts of criminals." So just, again, full disclosure, I'm a gun owner. I don't have any in my home, but I have a couple shotguns and a rifle in storage. So I'm a hunter. I enjoy my Second Amendment right to shoot deer and pheasants and other game. So anyway, it just struck me that honest, hardworking gun owners are being punished. And so anyway, dive in where you want. We've only got a few minutes. Richard?
Everybody's looking at me. So I'm looking out there at Tammy Ward and James Michael Bowers, who are part of with me on the city council. We've had good discussions, and we're going to continue to have great discussions about, we had 2 bills in front of us, now we have one that we possibly will see on Monday. And that will be open for public discussion on Monday. So everybody that wants to come down, please feel free to. We got all day. No, not
You'll stay all day, Richard?
We'll stay all day. I think we're all looking at this very hard. We all feel a sense of responsibility to look at everything that comes in front of us. We're spending a lot of time doing different things. I think a lot of us are just making sure there are about a lot of unintended consequences that maybe happen. And quite frankly, we think the state should handle it.
As he hands the mic to Senator Morfeld.
Well, it's not for lack of trying on the state side. I mean, listen, Dan, I'm also a gun owner. And so I'm not anti-Second Amendment. But I'm also pro-responsible gun ownership. And I'm also, listen, we need to look at the realities of our time. Gun violence is a serious problem. Yes, is it sometimes related to mental health issues? Sometimes. No, it's not always related to mental health issues, so you can't just connect those two. And also, I see down in the legislature a lot of the people that say that they're the gun rights proponents also then turning around and voting against funding for things like mental health services and other types of critical services to ensure that people are in the right state of mind and have the ability to get help in the mental health that they need. And so I've introduced the red flag law, and I think that for me, having red flag laws, which requires that you demonstrate that you are a serious threat to yourself or others with the use of firearms, until an emergency protection order is then given by a judge using due process. And even then, the NRA and some of the other gun rights groups have come out and opposed that. And, you know, listen, I mean, I don't know how much more targeted we can get with a policy than requiring a court order from a judge, due process. So evidence that you are a serious threat to yourself or others, and then having a hearing to be able to defend yourself or prove that maybe you aren't a threat and that this is, you know, in the minds of some people, bogus. If you're opposing that, I don't know what you're for then in terms of trying to prevent people who are clearly a threat to themselves and others in our community with gun violence. I don't know how more targeted you can get other than just gun bans. And that's not where I went because, again, I'm a constitutional law, you know, I'm an attorney that has specialized in constitutional law. I respect the Second Amendment, but there has to be a balance. And we don't have a balance right now. And my concern is that my opposition is not coming with any solutions. And when they do come with the solutions and they say, oh, more mental health, they're not down at the Capitol supporting my legislation that would provide more mental health.
It just seems like a lot of this is just, again, because I live in the political world too, is just, let's just run out the clock until we forget about it.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a strategy.
You know, thankfully Lincoln has not experienced some of the tragedies that other cities have across the country, but Omaha has in just recent memory with that terrible mass shooting at the shopping mall several years ago. But so I'm curious, Jack, I'll just throw it over to you. I don't know that you've tackled this issue on your wonderful morning show.
If I do it very carefully.
Because, you know, Nebraska is obviously a red state. Lincoln is becoming more and more purple. And, you know, I think, though, no matter your political stripe, I think all of us agree that we at least need to have the conversation that enough is enough. And we need to look at ways that we can honor the Second Amendment and not, you know, infringe on people's constitutional rights, but at the same time, what can we do to head off a tragedy?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll be the one to say it up here on the couch, I'm not a gun owner. I'm a city boy, as much as you can be a city boy from Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm not scared to live in my house in Lincoln, Nebraska without a gun either. And so that's a unique perspective. And so I think sometimes we've got to define what right, there's a Second Amendment right. We disagree, I think, probably even up on this stage about what that means. But I think there's also a right to be free from gun violence that comes about as a result of illegality or a result of negligence or a result of not storing your gun in a smart way at all. And I think that's a competing right. We come up against competing rights in policy all of the time, but we don't define what that latter right is very often. And that's the one that I'm thinking of and I think about for myself and my family, to be honest. And so, you know, I know the city of Lincoln is talking about issues like safe storage, maybe requirements of locking it up. I don't know if that's the right thing to do. You know, there's part of me that thinks you look at some of the states that have just more of a general negligence standard, that there's a criminal, basically there's a criminal case that if you're negligently storing the guns, given the circumstances, what you should or should have known at the time, to store it, knowing who's in your house and who might have had access to it. You know, if you leave your gun out on the counter and a kid grabs it and goes outside and injures somebody in the neighborhood, who should be held responsible for that? And I've had that conversation on the air, and I was surprised at the amount of people who said, no one. I really was. And that's that second right that I'm talking about with this whole thing. The only other thing that I'd say, after having said that, I think there is, every time unfortunately, we've gotten very used to having these conversations after these terrible mass shootings across the United States. And one of the things that happens is there is an argument that comes up afterwards where people insinuate, I don't know if everybody's doing it, but people insinuate that these things could be 100% prevented by some level of gun control. And I don't think they can, but that doesn't completely inform my position on gun control either, but I think it does a disservice to the argument because I think that's false. Whether it's background checks, whether it's limiting access to military-style weapons and those sorts of things, and the idea that, well, these things wouldn't be happening if these policies were in place. And most of the case, I can imagine a situation where they still would happen, maybe less frequently, but they'd still be happening. I think that puts I think that hurts the argument. And I think there are other reasons, there's certainly other reasons that go into it, but our conversation about gun control is so informed by these mass shootings right now, and that sort of throws off the discussion a little bit.
Well, and I think it's important too. I mean, the thing that is interesting to me is, I introduced this red flag law, and then I received 3 death threats from people that are anti-red flag laws and pro-gun. And, to me, it's like, number one, you're making the case for yourself or against your own argument. But then number 2, why can't we have a reasonable discussion about this? I'm not trying to take away all your firearms. I'm just trying to provide a process for your firearms to be temporarily taken away for up to a year when you demonstrate a danger to yourself or others. And also, no rights are absolute. That's constitutional law 101, okay? Yes, constitutional rights have a much higher protection. But when there's a legitimate state interest, a compelling state interest, those rights can be abrogated to be able to preserve the interest of the society as a whole. And so the right to bear arms is not absolute. No right is absolute. The right to freedom of speech is not absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded room when there's no fire. And so there has to be a level of reasonableness. I do not believe we should be able to take away all guns. I think that would be unconstitutional. I would not be in favor of that. I do think, and it would also be impossible, but I do think that we need to have more reasonable laws that allow people to be able to take firearms away from other individuals, at least temporarily, when they demonstrate a clear harm to themselves and others. And if you're opposed to that, then I can't have a reasonable conversation with you because you're not a reasonable individual.
Yeah, how about that? So, wow, this is a great discussion. And there's smart people on this stage, too. That's what occurs to me. So, okay. So I hate to be the bad guy, but I'm going to break off our conversation and encourage everyone to listen to this conversation. And that's Senator Morfeld, Senator Wishart, Jack, and Richard. This is exactly the kind of conversation that I hope we can continue to have, not only on this program and Jack's program, but amongst the community in Lincoln and the broader community in Nebraska. Because if we can't have these conversations, then we're not going to make progress, and do it in a way. I encourage everyone, when you have these conversations, either at the dinner table or at family gatherings, pick up a 6-pack of Zipline. It helps. Okay, let's wrap up. So if you will allow me a few minutes to thank a few people that made this evening possible. Please thank these great sponsors of Lincoln Calling: Allo, Nelnet, and the Foundry, KZUM, and also I just want to point out that Spencer Munson is the genius behind the 16th annual Lincoln Calling. I don't know where Spencer, he's probably lifting something or doing something, or he doesn't get to enjoy himself till this thing is all over. I want to thank a few people that made Pints Politics possible. Our new producer, Steve Van Hoosen, is running around. Steve, and you see these cameras and the audio. Kim Remington, operations manager for Parsons PR, otherwise known as our bar tender for the night. Gabriella Parsons for photography and video. I know where Gabby went. Yeah. But most important, please give a great hand for these wonderful guests, Senator Anna Wishart, Senator Adam Morfeld, Jack Mitchell from KLIN Radio, and City Councilman Richard Mcginnis. Thanks, guys. And, stick around and listen to some great music. So a fresh Pints and Politics will air every fourth Friday of the month. You can find us on pintspolitics.com, on iTunes, on Stitcher, whatever your favorite podcast platform is. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll have not only this audio up soon, a week from today, but we'll also have some great videos. So thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the evening.